Hello. Feature selection is something that I mentioned in class today and that you'll want to be able to do many times in your experiments, and you'll want to refer to this many times throughout the semester. Here I'm going to show you how to do feature selection on the classify panel of the Explorer, but it works very similarly in the Experimenter and also in Lightside. So for now, let's just look at it here. So here you can see on the Classify panel the usual Choose button. If I click on that, then I can look in the Meta folder for the Attribute Selected Classifier. So to do feature selection, and you'll remember feature selection is where we take the huge set of features that we have and we narrow down to a strategic subset of those features that correlate well with our class value. We want to be able to do that over the training data that we're going to train on before we apply our model building training algorithm. So it's part of the training process, but it's often done as kind of a pre-processing step. Nevertheless, as we discussed, you don't want to do this over your entire data set, including what you're going to test on. You just want to do it over the training data. So if you're doing a cross-validation, you want to just do the feature selection on each fold for just the training data for that fold. So on every fold, you're going to do the feature selection again, potentially selecting a different set of features. So just like if you build a decision tree on each fold of your cross-validation, you get a different tree, you will get a different set of features, and that's not a problem at all, because the way you're selecting your features on each fold is the same. And remember, in our cross-validation, what we're evaluating is the way we're doing that training, the way that we're building our model, the assumptions that we made, or the decisions that went into how we're configuring it. Those things are the same across each fold, but they play out slightly differently because the data is slightly different. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is select this meta classifier, Attribute Selected Classifier. And now once we've done that, we have to configure the feature selection. So you can see here I'm clicking on the text that says Attribute Selected Classifier, which brings up the object editor for feature selection. And it has some things that we need to configure. So you'll see there are 3 choose buttons. One for what is the algorithm we're going to use to build our model. One that's about how we're going to evaluate the goodness of features in order to find that subset that performs well. And the other is the search. What is the way that we're going to move through the space of possible subsets of features? Now sometimes we're going to simply apply a criterion that's what's listed in the evaluator to each feature separately and then rank and then pick the ones that got the best score. Other times we're actually going to evaluate subsets of features together, in which case what we're evaluating is not individual features but subsets of features. We're going to stick with a simple technique now. So first let's just leave the same base classifier. That's what we're going to use to build our model after we do our feature selection. So it's J48. And now we're going to actually configure the feature selection proper, but we're going to do it in a very simple way. So for the first one, the evaluator, what we're going to do is click the Choose button and select chi-squared attribute eval. Now some of you will find that you don't have chi-squared attribute eval in your list. I've noticed this with some versions of Weka. If that's the case, then take the correlation attribute eval. It does essentially the same thing. Okay, and now for the search. So chi-squared attribute eval is a type of evaluator that assigns a score to each feature separately. So if we've done that, then we can do the feature selection by sorting the features based on what the evaluator has said about how good it is, and then just taking the ones from the top of the list. That approach is called ranker. So if we're using one of those evaluator functions, then ranker is the search technique that we should pick. Later in the semester, when we come back around to feature selection, we'll talk about some of the evaluators that evaluate subsets of features together. And so then we'll have to look at some of these other search methods. But for now, until then, just do this simple approach. Okay, now once we've selected ranker, there are some things that we have to configure about it. We can either select the number of features that we want to select, how many top ranking features do we want, or we can set a threshold on the criterion function. So what we're going to do is set the number of features that we want. And you can see here I've put in 50, and that's fine for now, for just this example. So what I'm going to tell you as a rule of thumb is if you have a very small data set, you don't want to have a lot more features than you have instances. So in that case, if you only had 50 instances you were training on, you'd probably want to set num to select to something like 50. But if you have around 1,000 instances, then probably 1,000 features is not too bad. There are times when you'll have much larger feature spaces, tens of thousands of features, or even hundreds of thousands of features. And that's okay as long as you have enough data to support that, and you have enough memory in your computer to be able to deal with such a big model. But for now, let's keep it simple.